fungal relationships with humans go back a very long way. Since before we were human, relating to fungi is not an option for anyone living on this planet, for any organism living on this planet. Fungi are so much part of the biosphere that one has to relate to fungi and to the consequences of fungal life. My interest in fungi has grown over the course of my life. I remember becoming aware of their power to transform the world when I was young, maybe about 6. I was taking kitchen waste into the garden to put on a compost heap. Several months later, I would help my father put what had now become soil onto the flower beds. And I was asking about why it was that the banana skins and orange peels could turn into soil. How could this happen? And he explained that it was because of microbes that could decompose the world to transform matter from one state into another. And that some of these transforming organisms were called fungi. I became very intrigued by this because it seemed like a superpower, and it really still does. The power to transform matter through decomposition. And I became very curious about fungi because they seem to have such power, seem to have such a superpower, but I couldn't see them doing it. I couldn't see what they were. No, they were intermingled in their food, so I couldn't see them or catch them in the act. And that really piqued my interest. I keep becoming interested in fungi. The more I find out, the more I research them, the more I spend time with passionate fungal knowledge holders. The more I've learned about fungi, the more I've realized how important they are to the life as we know it, to the living world. And the more exciting the living world has become. They're so strange compared to us, humans. They do things so differently. They reveal all sorts of possibilities that I didn't imagine could take place. They teach lessons about interconnectivity, about communication, about intelligence, about waste. There's no waste in the living world, and fungi makes that very clear. They teach so many lessons, and the more I learn about fungi, the more I want to learn. And I'm not alone. There are many people who study fungi, and you see a similar pattern. The more you learn, the more you want to learn. It's like you're sliding down a water slide of ever-deepening fascination. One of the great types of relationship that fungi form are called mycorrhizal relationships. And these are formed between certain groups of fungi and plants. And these fungi live in and around plant roots, and they grow outwards into the soil, and they find nutrients which they transport through their networks, and they exchange with plants. So the plants provide the fungi with energy in the form of sugars or fats, and the fungi provide the plant with nutrients like nitrogen or phosphorus that they've acquired in the soil. And almost all plants depend on these associations. And these associations are ancient. It was because of these associations that the ancestors of plants were able to move from water onto land in the first place. So these fungal relationships are a more fundamental part of planthood than many things that we think of as plant traits, like leaves or flowers or fruit or wood. This relationship really lies at the base of life on land as we know it. Humans have formed all sorts of relationships with fungi over the years that have proved really important, whether as foods, as agents of fermentation, for example, producing alcohol, or cheese, or bread, as producers of medicine. Penicillin is a famous example, but there are many, many others. As alterers of our minds and senses in the form of psychedelic fungi. Whenever we relate to a plant, we're relating to fungal relationships because all plants depend on fungi that live either in their leaves, in their shoots, or in their roots. So all the food that we eat is the result of fungal activity in some way. Are there ways that we can deepen our partnerships with fungi? Are there ways that we can find new ways, perhaps, to relate with fungi to help us adapt to these challenging times? And I think there are lots of ways that that can take place. And I think many of these ways have their roots in the old ways that we've related to fungi, whether as foods. You can grow nutritious medicinal mushroom crops on agricultural waste, for example, in a short space of time without needing sunlight. Medicines. How many fungal medicines have not yet been discovered? These medicines might be crucial for humans or for the animals or organisms that we depend on. Plants. How can we reimagine forestry and agriculture to take place in a way that feeds the ecosystems that it participates in rather than extracts? Are there ways that we can use fungi to harness many of the waste products that we create? Can we invite fungi to decompose some of the poisonous products left over from industries? Are there ways that we can build material from fungi? Build material that we can actually use to fabricate with, whether it's leather-like materials or as blocks that we can build from. So there are so many ways that we can work with fungi to adapt to these challenging times, and we can take this to a new level, and I'm excited to see what happens. Some fungi can cause us big problems as diseases, as pathogens. And the impact that fungal pathogens are having on humans seems to be on the rise. This is partly due to irresponsible use of antifungal drugs, applying them liberally when we don't have to, creating the condition for certain fungi to evolve resistance. It's partly through neglect, because there is far less funding given to the development of new antifungal drugs, or indeed for vaccines against fungal diseases, than there is into research for drugs and vaccines against bacterial and viral diseases. So it is a problem. Fungal superbugs are on the rise, largely due to our behavior, and we're going to need to find ways to deal with this in the future. I should point out that a tiny minority of fungi cause these problems for humans, but the problems they cause can be significant. People often ask me if I have a favorite fungus, but there are so many ways to be a fungus. They look so different, they behave so differently. But one day I was in Tasmania, I was in Australia, and I found a fungus called Iliodictyon, which forms like a skeleton of a football. It's kind of round shape, with interlocking, tessellating hexagons, and it produces a nasty smelling slime that it uses to attract flies, which helps spread its spores. Sometimes it can become dislodged from the floor and roll from place to place on the floor of the forest. And this one was a very strange fungus to meet, and one that's always stuck in my mind. It's so important for me to be a scientist in the world that you're studying. And it's easy to be in the lab, it's easy to feel like you're in control over the bits of life that you're studying. But when you're in the field, you're in the test tube along with everyone else. And you realize that you're not always in control. Storms can happen, dusts can blow in your face or in your apparatus, floods can happen, any number of things can happen, and you realize that you're just another player in the orchestra of life. And I feel that's a really helpful way to come back to humility. And I like to come from humility when I'm asking questions about the living world. Mushrooms, I think, have long been linked with mythology. They are mysterious organisms. They appear rapidly, they disappear rapidly. They are often associated with death and with decaying matter, which is, of course, one of their really important roles in the biosphere. But they're also, in that process, they're a reminder of the life that comes from death, that death and life are not separate categories, but part of one continual cyclical process. There's lots of mythology about mushrooms and the ways that they can heal us, the ways that they can affect our minds and the way that we think and feel and imagine, the ways that they can feed us, what they can tell us about what's going on outside, what's going on under the ground, what's going on in these hidden realms that we can't see with our own eyes. So fungi and mushrooms in particular have played very important roles in the stories that we tell about life and our role in the living world.